please welcome Mike Berwick. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'd like to begin as I began the last time I spoke in this hall and make it quite clear that I'm not standing for councillor or mayor. And I know Deirdre and Donnie Gray and a few others will probably answer that question, so excuse me for preempting you, but I think I need to make that clear because there's even a conspiracy theory that I'm going to go for CEO. I'm not qualified for that. I wouldn't apply for it and I probably wouldn't get it if I did. Anyway, all that being said, Michael's done a bit of an intro on who Friends of Douglas are. I'd just like to add to that, it's a bit more than a small group of people. It's really a network of whoever wants to be involved. It is volunteers, and it's thanks to FODS that you've got a referendum at all. And FODS, I need to say, was given authority at the last public meeting here to investigate the finances and work further on it. So FODS is an open book. You can see everything they stand for. Their donations have all come from the community, and like most community groups, it's a small bunch of people that have worked hard. A little bit more history. At the time of amalgamation, the council hired John Orange, a consultant, who did a report on the state of a submission, I suppose, as all councils were to do, and we thought we were pretty safe. It was a glowing report, and we met all four criteria that local governments had to pass the test of the government at the time. We were financially sustainable, we provided cost-effective services, we had geographic boundaries of our own, and were remote from anywhere else, and we had a strong community of interest, meaning most people who lived here worked here. The community groups were all made up of people who lived here, and so on and so forth. When they finally announced we were going to be amalgamated, none of those reasons seemed to carry any weight, and the only reason given was that we would get a better governance. Well, I'd challenge you as to whether we got better governance with the last council or the current council in Cairns. There was a big demo, of course, 40% drop in the ALP vote. I need to point out that I'm not a person opposed to amalgamations per se. Cairns and Mulgrave needed to amalgamate, Townsville, Farrangower, Charter Spowers, Dalrymple, you name it, where suburbs and cities had merged into one big area and they found the two offices in the same town. Only made sense, but not for places like this. The LNP promised that they would allow a de-amalgamation, and I think we all need to be very grateful for the fact that we've got a referendum. However, their process has really been quite appalling, and I'll come back to that in a moment. I'm not going to talk much about finances because we'll get David Carey's analysis, but I do want to say that analysis has been very thorough, and it's been up against the council, Cairns City, who refused to give us any information, how much rates were collected, how much money they spent here, what their proposed capital works are. To this day, they've refused to part with any of that information, but they do have it because they gave it to the QTC and they derived those numbers somehow, but refused to tell us how they did it. So it's been very difficult to work numbers when you run up against that. And therefore, when David did his analysis, we sought some review by the QTC, the Queensland Treasury Corporation, but they didn't review it either. There was no response. So we've been very open in saying this is the best we can do on these assumptions, and this is what it looks like. David will got a lot more information now. We all agreed on the one-off cost of the amalgamation, or near enough to, it was 3 or 4 million. And that's not really the issue in the long term. With a budget of $40 million a year over the long term, that's not a big number. The issue that was raised was that the claim was that we wouldn't be viable. Well, of course, that didn't pass the common sense test because everyone knows we were very viable before. We were in a very strong financial position. That was recognised by the Minister at the time, and there's no dispute about that amongst the powers that be. So what the QTC's done in saying that we were not strong was really based on Cairns' operating model, but I'll leave that to David to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about the functions of local government, because I see there's been a bit of discussion saying that local governments are just about providing services, water, rates, sewerage, rubbish, garbage. Well, that idea went out in the middle of last century. Local governments do a great deal more than that. They have a whole lot of statutory responsibilities like land use planning, public health, domestic animal control, you name it, a whole host of those sorts of functions. And there's a lot of non-statutory functions, things that you don't have to do, but most little councils do. And it's things about economic development, environmental management, welfare, and a whole lot of small things. And those things, of course, reflect what the community wants. Maybe councils don't do it right, but they are elected and they do attempt to balance what the community wants. And it brings in all of those sorts of things, because they're the things that make the community function and flourish and work. It's not just the fixed infrastructure, it's the economy, it's the social setting, it's the welfare of the people, it's the environment, and so on. And I'll give you a few examples. We did a lot of work on the economic side with our two main industries of tourism and sugar. And with tourism, we brought in the Shire's Estates first tourism strategy back in the late 90s. Julia was working for the council at the time, she got the money. And out of that we have come the tourism levy and the funding of tourism promotion, and the recognition that in our town planning scheme that the beauty of this Shire was absolutely the foundation of the tourism industry. And we did a lot of work with cane too. I think it's well recognised that the Douglas Shire worked hard through those really difficult years of the cane industry, and I think we played a role in helping the cane industry survive at a time when it was right on the edge. And I can tell you that none of the other cane areas thought this region had any hope of its cane industry surviving. It seems too small. We had partnerships with CSIRO and Science, and they worked with both tourism and the cane industry in looking at best practice, at a whole lot of research and information that we got for free, and I know that CSIRO would love to form partnerships with local governments. On the environment, of course, you've got an industry that depends absolutely on the environment, and hence planning. We live in a very contested landscape, so land use planning becomes something that requires very extensive community engagement, and it's a hot issue, as you would all know, but you have a lot of competing interests, and it's the council's job to try and resolve those. The fixed urban footprint, the Boundary Commission has tipped the bucket on us for that, but the fixed urban footprint came out of industry. It was the cane industry that first of all told councils before my time that they need every square inch of land they could have to survive. And the tourism industry similarly said the scenic values of this Shire are vital to the success of tourism. So planning needed a lot of consultation. I wouldn't say the council got it right, but they did their best, and I would say it was a great deal more engaged than a council in Cairns will ever be. Now, as I say, all little councils do these sorts of things. They do economic, social and environmental stuff. But many of those little rural councils in Queensland were struggling to survive, and Douglas was a bit different there. We had some unique characters that allowed us to be the small council but still be financially viable. We had a strong rate base for a start, and we can thank the tourism industry for that. Douglas Shire was a great place to live and work. We never had any trouble attracting good quality staff like they might do out west. The exceptional beauty in the environment made this a very attractive place, not just to live, but made it the contested landscape and put it under a huge amount of development pressure, enormous pressure back in the boom days. It's not there now because everything's gone quiet, but it was huge. It's got its own international tourism industry, which of course competes with industries like Cairns, the Whitsundays, Asia and the Pacific. But it's competed pretty well. And it held its own. And a lot of that was due to the partnership that occurred between Douglas and the tourism industry. It had its own self-contained tourism industry. This industry either survived en masse or sunk en masse because you couldn't transport the cane anywhere else. And it had an amazing community of interest. There was over 100 community groups, and they're probably mostly still there at the time of amalgamation. And they were made up of people that ever work here, and that's a real indication of the strength of this is a very lively and vibrant community in all ways. things like aged care. Do you think, can you imagine Cairns Regional Council buying a block of land for aged care in the Douglas Shire? I think not. But having said that about all the other things local governments do, the services were really important too. And I'll just go through them. So water. We had the best water in Australia. And they spent a lot of money on it and they trashed it. I am quite confident that if Douglas Shire came back, we would be able to get chemical-free water again. And I say that with good reason, because we got fantastic advice in the form of Don Bursell, Australia's, he was the head of the Australian Health and Medical Research Council, which sets the standards for water quality around Australia. He's Australia's chief scientist. He was the CEO of the Australian Drinking Water Cooperative Research Centre. Don came up here and gave us advice, told us how to go about it, gave a formula, wrote a report, put it to Cairns City. They've chosen not to do it. So, given that level of advice, I'm quite confident that we can return to a chemical-free water. Sewage. We were very early in the piece moved over to tertiary treatment, and Port Douglas is tertiary treated, and all the water out of there is 100% reused on golf courses and public spaces, and that's pretty impressive. Having said that, we know that the beach communities need to be sealed. We knew that in the previous council. It's expensive, it's a priority, it's probably the Shire's #1 infrastructure priority, and it's a big cost. And we've been told we can't afford to do it. And I just want to put paid to that idea. It's nonsense. We were looking at maybe $30 million as the cost of sewering the beach communities that aren't served at the moment. But we were looking at different technologies, and Ken said we can't afford that. Well, we were looking at different technologies instead of the standard system that runs through everyone's backyards and digs up their fences and gardens and pools and then has to restore them, with vacuum systems that run down the road. They're a lot cheaper, they're more environmentally friendly, they're less impact on the community. There's $42 million there for capital works, of which about 30 is specifically for sewerage. That's a bucket of money that can be drawn on. Douglas Shire had probably $20 million worth of land, still has, they haven't sold any of that. All surplus to needs. There's nothing wrong with selling that land to put into another asset like sewerage, and probably better there because it would give a better return on investment than it does simply owning blocks of land that aren't used. So we had a lot up our sleeve. So Douglas Shire can afford to do these things and will afford to do them. And importantly, when you do things like sewer community, the community engagement is big time, because you really wreck everyone's backyard going through them. So it's a tough thing on local communities, but we thought we had a way of doing this without such a level of disruption. Garbage. It was Douglas Shire that initiated the waste treatment plant in Cairns so we could close our landfill in Killaloe, and we got a very good deal out of that, I've got to tell you. I don't think that's very well run now, that's a whole other story. But the point is, it was Douglas Shire that kicked that off. So in terms of services, the Douglas Shire did pretty well as all the other things. Not perfect, but like many small communities, it reflected what the community wanted. Couple more things. I just want to talk about this dysfunctional council that keeps getting talked about. The council wasn't dysfunctional. It brought the budget in as a surplus. It kept fixing the roads. It's still run under environmental award. 90% of the decisions were unanimous if you looked at the council minutes. Most things we agreed on. We had a hell of a fight, which wasn't a good look, over the town plan and over the dismissal of a certain staff member and a few things like that. But overall, the council kept functioning and it kept delivering. It was democracy, and it was a lively event, and some people didn't like it. I didn't much like it. But there it was. It wasn't dysfunctional, it kept working and it kept delivering. And I just want to say finally, that's my time's up, there's no way that I'd be standing up here saying the council's viable if I really thought it wasn't, because I live here and I value my reputation, and it would very quickly be proved wrong, and I'm sure that David Carey's in exactly the same position. He values his reputation a great deal, I know that, and there's no way people like us would be saying you can de-amalgamate and survive, because it won't be long before we'll prove right or wrong. Thanks for that.